Entitled Rich Girl Disrespects Black Judge, His Ruling Stuns the Courtroom. The courtroom was silent as the young woman sauntered in, her designer heels clicking against the polished floor. Madison Carter was no stranger to luxury. Her family's wealth had protected her from consequences her entire life. She wore arrogance like a badge of honor, convinced that no matter what she did, her last name would shield her from any real punishment. She had never faced a real problem, never known what it was like to struggle. Everything in her life had been handed to her, from her designer clothes to her expensive car, and she believed the world owed her something simply because of who she was. Judge Marcus Reynolds, however, had seen it all. A black man who had worked his way up from a childhood of struggle, he knew the weight of the gavel in his hand. Justice was supposed to be blind, but too often, it favored the privileged. And today, he was about to prove that in his courtroom, money couldn't buy immunity. He had spent his career fighting for fairness, for a world where justice wasn't just for the wealthy, and he wasn't about to let some spoiled heiress make a mockery of the legal system. Madison had been charged with reckless driving and endangering lives. She had been speeding through a residential neighborhood in her brand-new luxury car, nearly hitting a mother and her child in the process. When officers pulled her over, she laughed it off, flashing her father's name like a golden ticket. But now, standing before Judge Reynolds, she didn't seem the least bit concerned. She was tapping her manicured nails on the table, looking around as if she were bored, completely unbothered by the seriousness of the situation. "So, Miss Carter," the judge said, his deep voice echoing through the room. "Do you understand the severity of your actions?" Madison sighed dramatically, flipping her perfectly styled hair. "Honestly, Your Honor, this is such a waste of time. Nobody got hurt, and I have things to do." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The sheer disrespect in her voice was shocking, but Judge Reynolds remained calm. He had seen people like Madison before, people who believed they were above the law. People who had never faced a single consequence in their lives. People who thought the world revolved around them. He leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "Miss Carter, do you believe that because of your wealth, you should not be held accountable?" She rolled her eyes. "I just don't see why this is a big deal. My father already spoke to some people. This should have been handled." Judge Reynolds took a deep breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had worked too hard to allow privilege to silence justice. He wasn't just a judge today. He was a man standing in front of a system that had let people like Madison get away with too much for too long. And he wasn't going to let her walk away without understanding the weight of what she had done. "Miss Carter, I'm going to do something no one in your life has ever done before," he said firmly. "I'm going to hold you accountable." Her smug expression faltered. "Excuse me?" "I'm sentencing you to 6 months of community service," he continued. "And not the kind where you sit behind a desk and pretend to help. You will be working in the very neighborhood you endangered. You will look into the eyes of the people who don't have the luxury of ignoring consequences." Madison's face turned pale. "You can't be serious." "I am very serious." Judge Reynolds locked eyes with her. "Perhaps, for the first time in your life, you will understand that your actions have weight. That the world does not revolve around you." The courtroom was silent as the words sank in. Even Madison's expensive lawyer seemed unsure of what to say. There was no bribing her way out of this, no family name that could erase what had just happened. For the first time, Madison Carter was facing the real world. She opened her mouth to argue, but Judge Reynolds cut her off. "If you fail to complete the required hours, you will face jail time." A gasp echoed through the room. Madison's father, seated in the back, shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for a scenario where money couldn't fix everything. Madison's lips trembled, but she said nothing. For the first time in her life, she had no clever remark, no smug retort. She was trapped in a world where privilege could not protect her. And for the first time, she was forced to face the reality of her actions. As the bailiff led her away, Judge Reynolds watched her go, hoping that this moment would change her. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of her finally understanding what true responsibility looked like. Days later, Madison found herself standing outside a community center in a neighborhood she had never stepped foot in before. The air smelled different, the streets were lined with old buildings, and the people walking by didn't care who she was or where she had come from. Dressed in plain clothes, with no designer labels to hide behind, she felt exposed. The supervisor of the center, an older woman named Mrs. Green, greeted her with a firm nod. "You're late," she said, not giving Madison the chance to complain. "You're here to work, not to sulk." Madison clenched her jaw but said nothing. She was assigned to clean floors, organize donations, and help with the after-school program for children who came from struggling families. It was exhausting, far more tiring than she had ever expected. But it was the looks on the children's faces that struck her the most. They weren't bitter, even though life had given them so little. They smiled, they laughed, they worked hard, and they cared for each other. For the first time, Madison felt ashamed. Not because she had been caught, but because she had never once considered the world beyond her own. 6 months passed, and when Madison stood before Judge Reynolds once more, she was not the same girl who had sauntered into his courtroom months ago. She had been changed by the very people she once dismissed. Her voice was quieter, her posture humbler. Judge Reynolds looked at her, and for the first time, he saw something real in her eyes. Growth. Understanding. Regret. "Have you learned your lesson, Miss Carter?" he asked. Madison nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." The courtroom was silent again, but this time, it wasn't shock that filled the air, it was something else. A lesson learned. A privileged girl who had finally opened her eyes. And a judge who had done exactly what he had set out to do. The sound of true justice. Hello, amazing viewer. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more awesome content, and ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. I'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Let me know what you think. And if you found this video helpful or entertaining, please share it with your friends and family. Your support means the world to me and helps this channel grow. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.